All right, good evening. Welcome to the Neary Building Committee meeting. It is Thursday, December 5th, 2024. It is 7:02 p.m. First item of business is approval of meeting minutes from November 21, 2024. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, I will move that we approve the minutes as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Kathy just arrived, so I'm just going to see if she wants to. Hi, Kathy.
Hi.
We have a motion on the floor to approve the minutes as presented. We're about to do a roll call. Andrew,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Denise,
Aye.
Roger,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
Kathy,
Aye.
and I am I as well. Item 3, we'll skip and go to item 4, community feedback and outreach plan. I plan to have this as a standing agenda item as we move forward. Since the last meeting, I'm not aware of any public open houses or tours or anything like that. But I do know that the communication subcommittee did meet right after our last meeting and continued to put a few things into process in terms of actioning for the community. I do expect in the next 30 days or so that we will have some sessions with various groups that have asked for presentations in town about where we're at. And you also covered in my email that I had sent the other day is we've been invited to the select board and joint advisory committee meeting in a few weeks to present a project update. We'll leverage slides that we already have, probably add a few, but we will discuss that presentation as a committee in our next public meeting, including potential speaker roles for those that on certain topics that you may or may not be passionate about as we go. So if you have any items that you'd like to weigh in on at that point in time, we do plan to post it as an open public meeting. To the extent you can be there live, great, as well. And it'll be part of a much broader discussion that evening that I don't know, Kathy, if you just want to, you or Andrew want to give kind of layout how you're planning to use that meeting, because I do think it impacts the project and specifically discussions around the cost of the project.
So I hope that everybody can come in person. We're gonna have it set up so that everybody's gonna be on the table right in front of the Select Board Advisory Committee. We've invited Bill Cundiff, we've invited MTs to talk about the landfill, given there's been quite a bit of discussion about that on the blog. So it's gonna be quite a few people there, but I really hope that everybody can try to get there. It's gonna start, this part should start at 7:05. We've got a quick hearing to do at 7, that will take us 5 minutes. So it should start pretty promptly at 7:05. I know it's tough coming out on a night like that. Hopefully the weather will be good, but hopefully everybody can get there. If not, Zoom in for sure. It is a hybrid meeting.
All right, thank you.
And
Anything else from the committee on communication plan? I know it's a tough time of the year with the holidays, et cetera. All right. We will go into Skanska Arrow Street updates. Let me just get some of the team members over here. Good evening, all.
Evening.
Hello, everyone.
Greetings all.
Did I get everyone over from the Arrow Street side? I think I
Yes.
did.
So
And Larry, who's going to need screen sharing from your side tonight?
that'll be me.
Andrew raising his hand. All right.
Andrew, you're gonna show the whole package of stuff?
I was going to show all of our slides. I think
Okay.
that those are all the slides there are this evening. So
Yep. Yeah, it's just you guys tonight.
okay.
Okay.
So I'll let you go in whatever order you want, but for in clarity of the agenda, this is going to be a design review update, a discussion about the gym size, and the sustainability subcommittee and any updates you have related to discussions there. When you do get to the gym size, I do want to make sure I give some additional color because we did have a few members that weren't here last time, and I just want to make sure everyone's on the same page before we go into that discussion.
Okay, great. And I think we'll be starting in the reverse order of what you said, but I'll just share the screen now. Is that showing up for everybody?
It is.
Okay, I think Kate's going to kick us off.
Yeah, I think there were some questions at the last meeting about incentives. So I just wanted to give a little bit of a overview of that. We'll go into more details when we have the life cycle cost assessment back as well. But I just wanted to kind of go over this high level because we did this a little bit in June with the subcommittee, but we haven't done it at the NBC. So feel free to stop me if I'm giving too much information or if you have questions, but you can see on the slide here that there are really three buckets of potential incentives or funding that are related specifically to energy and the systems for the building. So there's on the state side, there's mass save incentives, and there's two pathways that are applicable, and really they're not explicit about you have to have this type of HVAC system to get this or this type for that. They're actually saying you have to hit a certain energy level. But in order to hit those energy levels, you'd have to have a different type of system just to hit those. So there's two pathways. Path one, which is really for projects that are going to have ground source heat pumps, are going to be able to meet the requirements for that pathway. And there's path two, and air source systems generally meet that path. They're not able to get quite to the energy level we need for path one. The majority of those paths one and two are sort of very similar in terms of the construction phase, but you do get additional dollars per square foot for path one. And then you also get more money in the operation side if you can prove that the building is operating to a specific limit of energy use. And then there's federal incentives, the main ones being what's called Section 48 and the investment tax credit, which has been around for a long time, but you might be familiar with in 2022, the investment or the Inflation Reduction Act changed and sort of added robustness to those investments. And it allowed for governmental and nonprofit entities to take advantage of those. So basically people who don't pay taxes can actually get direct payments instead of getting a tax credit. And this is very specifically to technologies. So technologies that would apply to like a school building would be solar, PV, energy storage or battery storage, and ground source heat pumps. Those are the three technologies that you might find in a school that also are part of this investment tax credit. And so it's really the ground source heat pump. The HVAC system, if it's a ground source heat pump, can apply for those. And then on the third side, there's the MSBA, the 3% additional reimbursement for meeting the specialized code. And it's really agnostic as to how you get there. You can use ground source or air source heat pumps. There's no qualifications around that. But I just put it on here because it is related to energy and, is an additional reimbursement above the base reimbursement. So just something to keep in mind. Usually when we present the life cycle cost assessment next month, we won't include that as an incentive, but we can also could just show you like what the amount is that's covered, but we don't treat it the same really as the state or federal incentive as reducing the construction cost. Any questions about those? I'm going to go into just a little like overview of the timeline over the project for the state and federal, and when certain things happen. And I'm going to go a little bit into potential dollar amounts for the state and federal. But any like high level questions about the different types?
I just have one on the federal. It says only ground source heat pumps qualify.
Yes,
What if
air
there was a
source.
solar component to it?
So solar will too. And you'll kind of see that when I get to a different slide.
Okay.
Right now, we don't know if solar is there. That's sort of but you have to have an HVAC system. So that's why I mentioned ground source there. But yeah, solar and energy storage, if they were to be part of the project, could qualify for this.
Okay. All right. I'll let you, go ahead, Kathy.
Okay, so just to tag on what Jason said, to be clear, a air source heat pump, I don't think qualify, in fact, I know it doesn't qualify for the,
Federal, yeah.
because that's been the case all along. There's a small benefit to it, but it's not the big 30% credit you get for the geothermal. So that's what we're talking about, is only if we do the ground source heat pump will we get the big payment, correct?
Yes, I mean, the mass save payment is quite extensive, but the largest payment would be the federal ITC, and that is only applicable to ground source systems.
Okay.
Go ahead, Chris.
The Inflation Reduction Act, that has a shelf life, though. Do we have to have a selection and paperwork submitted by a certain time?
Yeah, so it runs through 2032. That's what's in the current regulation right
Okay.
now. So you have to have
All
it
right, I
placed
thought
in
it was sooner.
service. It's placed in service by 2032 because you file
Okay.
after the system is placed in service.
Okay, and Mass Save, that's right now is there like a buffer on the expiration of their rebates?
There isn't. The 2025 3-year cycle is starting very soon. And in 2025, all of the incentives are continued from the previous 3-year period. So those will be at least for the next 3 years, but I don't anticipate that they wouldn't be renewed for the next 3-year cycle that starts in 2028.
Okay.
But the project would be going through and getting that the confirmed incentive amount within the next 3-year period, unless there was a major delay to the project, but you'd be getting because you kind of lock into that value that they agree, but before you're actually in construction.
Okay, thank you.
We'll let you keep going, Kate. Thanks for the answer
Okay.
so far.
So the next slide is just looking at a timeline for mass save. You can see the different phases of the project in those rainbow colors there. So basically in SD, it's signing the mass save MOU, which I know we had sent over, actually the utility National Grid sent over the MOU. And so that needs to be signed at some point in an SD. And then basically at the end of SD, we submit a mass save model to show like where the building is on track for our energy use. And so the model that we use for the LCCA, the life cycle cost assessment, is the same model that we can submit for that. And basically they just check it. And, if you've said you want to be path 1, they're going to check and see, is your model showing you that you're generally on track to be able to meet path 1? If not, they'll say, okay, what is your plan to get on track if that's the path you're going with? And if you're going with path 2, they'll confirm that you're on track for path 2. So that's really what happens through SD. And then through design development and construction documents, we just update the models as the design progresses and show that we continue to be on track with whatever the goal is that we've established. And then at the end of design, we'll submit a final model, and they'll give a tentative approved amount based on where you plan to be. And then at the end of construction, we will basically submit a change to the model if there was a significant change during construction, which we don't typically anticipate, but we also submit like the submittals and prove that the equipment that's in our model was really put into the building. And then that's where you'll get your first large piece of that incentive right after construction. And then there's a verification incentive that you can get after 12 months of verified operations. So if you say we're trying to hit this energy use intensity, you measure the building over that 12-year period or 12-month period. And then at the end of that, you show we hit it or we're below it. If you hit it, you get a certain amount of money and you actually get another 5 cents a square foot if you are below it, depending on how much you are below it. And that we don't start that at like day one when people move into the building, because commissioning is usually still going on. So we anticipate that you would ideally start that 12-month period 6 months within the 6 months after you occupy the building. And so you'd basically be able to submit for that part of the incentive about 18 months after occupancy. Any questions about the process?
Go ahead, Kathy.
So Kate, does Arrow Street have experience with some submissions for either the Mass Save program and or the federal program?
Yes, so we have gone through the Mass Save program on several projects, including this current version of what is called the Path One. We actually had the pilot project that was used to develop the Path One project. And so that particular project also has already gone through its verification piece as well. And so that project is fully done with Mass Save and it received its full incentives. That same project is also just submitted 2 weeks ago for the ITC credit. So that's the first project that we've had that's been placed in service and has submitted for that. And so they've done what's called their application, and then they'll find out, I believe it's by March, I think is the date, March or April. They'll find out if it was accepted and what the amount is that they're going to get.
Okay, so you've been through the whole process with one as far as Mass Save, and you're in the process with another.
Yeah, with Mass Save, we've had multiple projects go through that, but that and some of them have been Path One, some have been Path Two, so like both pathways. And then for the ITC, we've had one project that's submitted for that.
Okay, but that one is still in process.
It's still in process, yeah.
And with that one, who are you submitting to as far as the federal one goes?
They submit it to the IRS. I don't know exactly what the portal is. It's not something that we're involved with, but it goes through like an application portal.
Great. That's not encouraging. Okay, now going back to your previous slide, you said that MSBA points for energy efficiency is 3.
It's 3% additional percentage. And that's for hitting the stretch code, which is tied to the efficiency, but there's no specific technology that you have to do for that. It's really just incentivizing for doing an all electric building.
So I'm looking at the 3011 that was submitted with the PSR, and on it, it says 4. It could be up to 4.
Yep. So there's one additional point that has nothing to do with energy. So that is to do with indoor air quality and selecting materials, finished materials, and getting a certain amount of LEED points in the indoor air quality section of LEED. That's what that extra 1 point is.
So sticking with the 3 for a second, is it all or nothing?
For the 3, yes. The 3 is tied together. You can't get like 2 of that 3, like the energy, the stretch code is 3. You can get 1 for the indoor air quality, and you can total get 4. So you can get 1 or 3 or 4.
Okay, because we use 2 on this, so I just wondered, I can't remember the discussion how we used 2. Okay, so, all right, keep going. I just want to make sure that I understood why we have 4 here instead of 3. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
I just didn't put it on there because it wasn't
Fine.
related to energy, but there's an extra point. And so the next schedule is looking now at the ITC. So ITC, basically you don't do any of the process and application until after it's placed in service. So after construction is complete, it's placed in service, you'll do what they call a pre-filing application. And that will then be reviewed and they'll potentially ask questions. Like I said, we just had a project submit their first one. And then you'll be given a final amount that they're approving. And then you will file it, like the official filing, which would be the Form 990T for direct pay entities. And then you'll receive the direct payment after that's processed. So for the ITC, there's nothing that we're really doing during design and construction other than in the construction phase, tracking. The general contractor would be tracking the invoices and all of the pieces that are being paid out that we're going to be submitting as part of the reimbursement for this incentive. So that is the main process that happens during construction. The project also has to follow prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements, which are very similar to what projects are already doing in Massachusetts, but that's another tracking mechanism that happens during the construction phase between the subcontractors and the contractor to just make sure that they have all that paperwork compiled for the application. And so the one project that we have that has submitted for that, they did hire a consultant. This was after construction was done because the law was passed in the middle of construction for that project. It wasn't something that they were planning on doing, but then it became a reality when the IRA passed. And so they did hire a consultant to help them just collect all that paperwork and file their application.
Can I ask one more quick question?
Mhm.
Okay, so we're going to then have to finance it up front because we're not going to get the money for a while. So we'd have to finance it maybe even separately and then hope for the reimbursement.
Yes, Mass Save and the ITC, those are reimbursements. So you have to factor financing those because they'll come afterwards. Right now, there are no financial mechanisms to not do that. But I know there is a lot of interest in whether financial mechanisms will be developed that allow you to take advantage of that, similar to how it already happens on kind of like the private sector. But right now, there isn't a specific mechanism like that for direct pay in
Well,
the
the
public
place
sector.
service rule has been around for as long as I can remember, so that's not going to go away. So it sounds like it's going to be delayed. We're going to have to finance it. Sounds like up front, and then maybe separate that financing and as temp financing, and then pay it off and get the checks. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Can you speak to the prevailing wage incentives that go along with this? Because we usually get hurt by prevailing wage, but my understanding is we actually get helped by using prevailing wage on a project like this.
Yeah, so prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements would be, the prevailing wage portion of that would be the same as prevailing wage in Massachusetts. So it wouldn't be any different than what you would already be doing in Massachusetts. The apprenticeship for the IRA, the ITC specifically, is a little bit different than the apprenticeship that is just already standard practice in the unions. And it's really just more of a paperwork piece of it. So you do have to, the specification, the project manager will, the construction manager would know that they were following this if you're following it, and they would have to know upfront, okay, there's this extra piece of paperwork that needs to be tracked through the project. It doesn't really change what you're doing on the job. You're basically tracking the apprenticeship, and then if you're falling below the level that you're supposed to get to, you have to show that you're trying to get more people. The subcontractors have to show that they have a program where they're trying to get more apprentices. But if you don't hit the actual number, there's not a penalty as long as you're showing that you're trying to bring more apprentices into
the key there is there's a significant amount of documentation that would be required as part of the project to maximize the
Yeah, I
incentive.
wouldn't say it's significant, but it is just something that you have to make sure that you're tracking, it's a reporting mechanism that happens through the process, through the project.
So
Okay.
using prevailing wages throughout and whatever the apprenticeship means, employing those people will get us more money as far as the payment. That's what you're saying?
It's not more money, it's just a requirement of the ITC.
Okay, so you
It
have,
doesn't change your percentage number. It's just, that's actually a little bit incorrect. It does change your percentage number, because if you have to fall back to the base rate of 6%, that is where you will if you don't do the apprenticeship and prevailing wage. But then
That
if
was
you
my
do the apprenticeship and prevailing wage, you are bumped to the 30%.
interesting.
Go ahead, Chris.
Katie, is that only applicable to mechanical trades associated with the HVAC system, including
Yeah.
electrical?
Yeah, so the apprenticeship and prevailing wage just applies to the trades that are associated. So it will be more than mechanical. There'll be other trades that are associated with it. So for ground source, it covers the site work and the wells and the drilling. It also includes all the components of the HVAC. So there's a few different subcontractors that are part of the scope of what can be reimbursed.
So the one good thing we have going for us, both in Massachusetts, obviously, if you are licensed plumber, electrician, or HVAC technician, you have to have an apprenticeship in order to get your license. So all those major trades are kind of covered under the mass licensure.
Right.
But
It's just a little bit more like they already have these programs. And so the programs will qualify, but then there's this like accounting of like how many apprentices and are you hitting these caps. So that's the like little bit more tracking.
The
they're
ratio
not
to
always
journeyman to
doing.
apprentices, right?
Right.
Within a company, yeah. But where it gets tricky is you have the excavation, site work, and well drillers that will really don't have a requirement for an apprenticeship license. So that's where you may need to hire a union contractor that may have more laborers and civil engineers, et cetera, on staff. That'd probably be the only hole from a non-union union standpoint. If it did go open shop, and they obviously have to pay the prevailing wage, but they may not have apprentice programs established within their companies.
So if you want to hop to the next slide, this starts to get into on the federal ITC side. It starts to get into the percentage that's covered. So you'll see I also have section 30C on this slide, but this project is actually not eligible for that. But this was sort of a generic slide we do that shows this other federal tax credit. But that's just for alternative refueling, spacing electric buses. So that it can kind of ignore that 30C. But on section 48, you'll see the solar and then the ground source heat pumps. The fallback base credit, that 6%, that's where you would be, if you're not doing that apprenticeship and prevailing wage piece of it. And if you are, then your base credit is 30%. There are bonuses for domestic content. And then there are bonuses based on location, the energy community bonus, low income bonuses. Southborough and this census tract is not eligible for the energy community or the low income bonuses. And so you can kind of see that at the bottom for solar. You may get the domestic content bonus. Right now, we are assuming solar projects will not get the domestic content bonus. There's just not enough of the components manufactured in the US right now. So 30% is what we assume. Depending on when you actually purchased the equipment, you might get to 40% as more things get manufactured here, but right now it's 30%. And then for the ground source heat pumps, there is a good amount of domestic content available for most of that equipment. And so we assume that most projects would be able to get 40%. They'll get 30 plus that 10% domestic content bonus. If you go to the next slide.
Hold on, Kathy, do you have a hand up?
Yes. So Okay. Your other client that's already submitted, did they go after the, ground source heat pump 50%, or are they doing something else?
So they're ground source heat pumps, and they were grandfathered in, based on the timing of their place in service. They automatically got the 30% without having to do the prevailing wage and apprenticeship, because there was a window, that was from like the end of 22, into 23, and they fell in that window. Basically at the very beginning of the program, projects wouldn't have obviously known about that this was a thing, and so they wouldn't have done the apprenticeship piece of it. So they are submitting for 30%. We also didn't track the domestic content because, again, the project was already well into construction before the IRA was passed. So they didn't have a chance to do that because it wasn't something we were specifying and tracking. So they are going for the 30%.
So the company that helped them do this understood all of this and was able to put the documents together to prove what needed to be proved. So they really did understand it from beginning to end.
So most of the documentation came from the contractor because it was just documenting the actual cost of the materials and the cost of the project, which was a little tricky because, again, we didn't start the project knowing that this was something we had to track. So it was kind of after the fact trying to make sure they could track down, which is not that complicated because schedule of values and invoices are a thing. You need to know how much stuff costs to charge for your construction. So that was a big piece of it. And then I'm sure that there was parts to the application piece that their consultant helped them with. I haven't actually seen those components to it, so I don't know exactly what other pieces they needed. But in terms of the backup, it mostly came from the contractor.
So
So-
Kathy, maybe to help us keep moving on this topic, we are through the school's energy contractor, and Becky can weigh in here. We're gonna seek a proposal from a consultant to make sure that we're quantifying this and taking into account the right way based on whatever system we decide on. But B, if we do decide on a system and have a project that passes at town meeting, make sure we understand what it's going to cost us to maintain the documentation for the benefit. So nothing's been obviously engaged with yet, but they're going to bring a proposal forward to figure out how to collaborate and tie all this together with us.
Chris Evers, where are you? Chris, what number should I use to just estimate a ground source heat pump in this project? 6 million, 7 million?
I think we're going to get to
Yeah.
that on one of Kate's
Yeah.
coming slides.
Hold on,
Yeah.
Right, Kate?
just do this one math. So if we get 50% of 6 million and we get 3% from MSBA, we could, and I'm not even counting mass save, you could pay for the whole cost of this between all these incentives, correct? 3%.
Pretty close,
$1 million.
pretty close. I mean,
Yeah, if you assume that I don't know what your base reimbursement is, but say we'll just say 35%,
It's,
plus
yeah,
the
it's,
extra
it's
3%.
40,
39.84.
40.
And that's with the 30 or the extra 3, or that's before the 3.
Yeah, so, okay, keep going. Interesting.
So on the next slide, and I don't know exactly how the project's going to be funded, but if you were using tax exempt bonds, you do have to take a haircut, if you will, from that 30%. So this is just kind of showing on solar, 30%, you'd have to take off 6% for tax exempt bonds, which your effective rate will be 25.5. And on the ground source heat pumps, if we start with 40%, that's the 30 base plus the domestic bonus, and then taking the haircut for the tax exempt bonds, it comes to 34%. So they do get adjusted if you're using tax exempt bonds. So if you go to the next slide.
Kate, I just wanted
This
to
is-
jump
yep.
in. Far as I understand, the solar is if you purchase this solar panel system yourself as opposed to a PPA system, but I don't know if it's worth
Yeah,
talking about
PPAs
that for
are
a
very
minute.
different because they don't have to. They will take the ITC or the production tax credit. They will figure that into the rate that they give you for what you're paying them for the utility, but they're the ones that would take the tax credit piece. So yes, this would be like if you're purchasing solar directly and then could file for the ITC. So on the next slide, it just on the left, you see ground source heat pumps. On the right is an air source heat pump. So for the ITC, and I just left solar blank for now, but on the ground source heat pumps, our estimated cost, this was from the PSR estimate. So that'll be being updated, but that was 12.9 million for the ground source heat pump system. And again, this is all in, so it's the wells and all of the equipment in the building that could qualify and consider the full cost of the system. And I'm using that 34%. I'm just assuming tax bonds here, tax exempt bonds, and so that's why it's 34% instead of 40. And then on the right, you'll see for air source heat pumps, the incentive is 0 because air source heat pumps do not qualify for the incentive. And then you just go to the next slide. It's just going to layer on the state incentives, the main one being the Mass Save incentive, although I am showing the EV charging because there is some there for that. But the Mass Save at the ground source heat pumps, that's that 1,334,000. That's the incentive for path 1. And for air source heat pumps, it would actually be path 2, and the total would be that 394,000 for Mass Save. So at the very bottom, you're looking at the construction cost total. Again, this is from the PSR estimate, but it's 13 million for the ground source heat pumps. It's really the 12.3 if you take out the EV charging piece of that. And then on the right, you see the 8.6, that's the air source heat pumps. But then after the incentive, if you did both the Mass Save and the federal incentive, the cost for ground source would be the 7.3 million, and the air source would be the 8.2 million.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Chris Evers, are these our two choices here? We got to do one or the other?
Yeah, and then the third option was VRF, variable refrigerant flow.
So
option.
in this case, when I say air source heat pump, but I do mean actually the VRF system. There is a third electric system that we will look at in the life cycle cost assessment. It is most likely not the system you will go with, and so it's not estimated here, but the cost would be very similar to the air source heat pump system.
Okay, so there's 3 choices, these 2 plus that one.
Correct.
Okay.
Is there anyone that can speak to the number we're carrying right now in the cost estimate? Or what assumptions were made previously?
So,
Yeah.
go ahead,
Go
Larry.
ahead, Jim, if you remember. My recollection, sorry, I'll just jump in. And
Yeah.
I think we carried air source as the base with
Yeah.
a add alternate for ground source.
Yeah, that was my recollection as well, Larry.
And I think the add-on was $6 million, if I recall correctly. But I don't remember $8.6 million being in there, but maybe I just don't remember.
Is there a
Yeah, I mean, the difference was like 4.5 million, so that should be what that alter was.
Did we have a non-heat pump option?
That's what I was trying.
So the third
Not
option
really.
is
Yeah,
a
natural gas, oil, whatever the current system
no, so it has to be an electric system.
for the
So there's-
incentive, right?
Well, not just for the
For
incentive,
anything.
for just passing the components of the code, it really needs to be all electric. And then the specialized code, which is that extra 3% from MSBA, that requires the electric system, or to completely create infrastructure for full electrification, including planning and selecting equipment for future conversion and sizing your electric service for that. And it ends up costing just as much as putting the electric system in day 1.
I have no idea what you just said, but back to Chris.
I know, sorry, it's a lot, but
Chris, these are our 2 choices, right? Here, as far as the HVAC
Pretty
system.
much. I mean, and for, long-term energy efficiency and payback on utility bills, these are gonna be our best 2 options.
Okay, you're saying best 2. Are these truly the only 2 realistic options we have?
we're gonna
Kate?
study that third electric option, which is it has an air source component to it, and it also has an electric boiler option or component to it. So those three systems will be studied as a life cycle cost assessment. And so what that will show is construction cost, and we'll show this with and without incentives, construction costs, replacement and maintenance and operational cost over the period, and then it'll show you what the payback is between the systems. For that, we pick the least expensive system as just as our baseline, and then compare the more expensive systems to it, so you can see, is the payback 10 years or what the payback is. And we'll show that with and without incentives factored in. And we're doing a revised estimate so that you'll see new versions of these tables with the SD estimates as well.
You've got 8,878 in the estimate, the PSR. So, and you do call it the ASHP. So that ties out almost.
Yeah, there's probably a couple of components that I removed that wouldn't be part of. So there's some electrical components that wouldn't be able to be in the incentive. And so I probably pulled that out, and that's why it's a little bit different from 8.4 and 8.7.
It's very close.
So we'll go over incentives again when we go over the LCCA, but I just wanted to give you a sort of a primer on the process and the different points through the timeline for design, construction, operation of when these pieces come into that.
All right, you want to go to the next one?
So Jason, we're ready to talk about the gym size comparison. Did you want to say a few words beforehand?
Yeah, sure. Just for the members that weren't at the meeting last time, just wanted to make sure that in that meeting I had asked when we were going through the design review for the Aerostreet team to look at the potential options that we have for enhancing the gym size. And to be very clear, this was not a request that came from the school administration and really does not have to do with the school, but through a series of our public outreaches, it's become very clear that there is a desire within the community for it. I think it's our obligation to kind of study it and decide how we want to proceed as having, if we decide to proceed as is with the base 6,000 square foot gym, whether we decide to enhance it and whether that's part of the base item that we bring to town meeting or whether we do it as some sort of alternate option for the town to make a decision. But I felt we had an obligation to at least listen to the feedback and have our team here study it and provide us options and pros and cons. And then obviously there will naturally be a costing component to it at some point, but really just wanted to see what our options are, get a sense of where the committee wants to go with it, and then go from there.
Okay, so what we've got to review with you this evening is a comparison of all of the existing gym spaces in all of the elementary schools, Trotter Middle School and the high school. And just a couple of, this is a little bit of a dense slide and we can zoom in as needed. The items that are shown in purple, that's the court, like the play surface itself. And so when you see numbers that are in purple, that's the size of the play surface. And then the sort of black box around it is really the walls that encapsulate that basketball floor. And so the numbers that are in black are the dimensions of that. And so I will sort of walk us through from left to right, and then we can sort of compare that to what's currently in the design, and we can kind of start the conversation there. So in the existing Neary school, we've got these two gym spaces that are adjacent but not connected. And the play surface is 53 feet by 35.5 feet each, which is not large enough for an elementary school sized basketball court. Moving over to Finn Elementary School, we've got a 50 foot by 92 foot play surface in a larger space. It's got room for 5 rows of bleachers, is our understanding. That size court is usable for high school. That's actually slightly larger than a high school regulation court. Moving over to Woodward, we've got a 46 by 74 foot court, and that's an appropriate sort of elementary school size. That is very close to what we're currently carrying in our design, which is in this sort of bottom left of this slide. For comparison, what we've got is 42 feet by 74 for the actual play surface. Trotter Middle School has got a 50-foot by 92-foot court, which is a little bit larger than the high school. And then the high school's got 3 of the same sized courts. Each one is 50 feet by 84. And 2 of those courts have 12 rows of bleachers each. And one of them, it looks like we've got 6. And I forgot to mention that Trottier's got 6 rows in there as well. So this just gives you kind of the lay of the land of what's currently existing across all of the schools today. And in the bottom left is the proposed gym size, which is sort of the MSBA size of gym that's recommended. Each of these, and I'll say in our 6,000 square foot gym, there we think there's some room for maybe 3 rows of bleachers. And it does include certain minimum runoff room that you need on the sidelines and at the ends of the court. There might be a little bit of, adjusting that can happen here and there. But if you were to say to us, it's really important that we get a sort of high school sized basketball court here in this new project, probably that means that the overall size of this gym will grow somewhat, and the extent that it grows will have to do with things like how much additional seating and sort of additional area beyond the play surface is of interest for however the community wants to use it.
And just to clarify for the group, so the 6,000 square feet is what MSBA will reimburse. Anything over and above that is non-reimbursable. So I just want to make sure that that's clear.
Say that again, Jim. How much?
So 6,000 square feet for the gym is reimbursable. That's the max that you can have. Anything over that is non-reimbursable. Any square footage over 6,000 is non-reimbursable by the MSBA. Just want to make sure that's clear.
So I guess what direction would you need from us at this point, Andrew?
We'd like to understand. So what we've heard so far is that the community has expressed interest in having a larger gym, and if we could get some more information about what that functionally means for the community. Does that mean it needs to be a high school sized court so that they can have high school games occurring here if they need it, or if there was a tournament or something? Is there a request for a certain number of spectators that are able to be on the bleachers? Or are there any other uses that are currently happening in other buildings that the community would like to see happening here? These are all things that would impact how much the gym would need to potentially grow from what it is now. And I think that within a certain amount, like if it was growing just a little bit, it probably doesn't have a huge impact on the layout of the building or how the building sits on the site. If we needed to build a gym that was twice the size, if we needed to do a 12,000 square foot gym, because that's just what the community really is interested in doing, we probably need to look a little bit at what that does for the how the building sits on the site, because that's a quite substantially larger component of the overall layout of the building. So I hope that helps. I mean, it seems like there's a kind of a wide range of possibilities, and we're trying to kind of narrow down what it is that you're looking for.
I think just to jump in, You could say, well, we want to do something like Woodward, which really is a very tight gym, elementary school size, very tight. Or you could say, I think the one that sort of struck me was the Algonquin Gym C, which is a high school size court with a reasonably small amount of um, rows of bleachers or somewhere in between, and say, okay, that's what we need.
So,
Or you can say, well, we really want something as big as Finn and Trotter, which are more or less similar size.
I'll give you the feedback verbatim, and hopefully this provides some direction. And I see Kathy, I see your hand up too, so maybe you have some other items to add. But this came up in a discussion just comparing how the Finn School gym gets utilized and the Woodward gym gets utilized. The Woodward gym is beautiful for anyone that's been in there. It is woefully underutilized outside of school hours because there is no ability to have spectators safely in a gym for any sort of indoor activity. So it only can be really be used as like a practice space and never for any sort of game space. And you can obviously tell just looking at the difference. So I think the key thing that was requested was bleachers. What I heard from Andrew was that what you're currently proposing would probably get you 3 rows of bleachers at Neary. Um, with the current 6,000 square foot size, which I believe is very similar to what some of us saw at the Hildreth School that you designed in Harvard when we were in that particular gym. I think what we should understand, I'm not advocating for this, by the way, but I think we need to understand is because we were talking about younger children, so abandon any discussion of a high school sized gym. Like just completely out. We have plenty of space at Algonquin. What I'm trying to be able to answer to the community is because we're dealing with smaller children and because we're going to actually have potentially 2 sections of gym in this space during the school day now. When you look at Finn, again, I'm not advocating for double the size gym, but you can section that gym off and have 2 basketball courts for that age child group very easily. Is there a middle ground between Finn and Neary that we could think about that would allow an easy splitting without the ugly wall we have right now? Have bleachers, but not oversize it because I'm amazed that we're able to build the gym we have at Finn, and we're very fortunate to have that. But everything I heard is the demand exceeds the supply at this point.
Hmm.
So with that, I'll go
So
to Kathy.
Jim Burrows, what would it cost per square foot to add more to this gym?
So if you take the cost per square foot that we are carrying, if it's 921, that's what we currently have. So I did a quick run through of the 3011. So per 1,000 square foot increase, you are obviously increasing your construction costs. If we're just saying 1,000 square feet, that's 921,000, which would increase the town share by about 1.2 million. Because of the of that 1,000 square foot being non-reimbursable.
So the only thing I would say to this at this point is I would proceed with this very cautiously. I'm not sure the statement that the community wants this is correct. Maybe some people do, but you've got a lot of people who are very concerned about the cost of this project. And even if we can make a case that there could be a payback because you could get people, groups renting the space that can't rent it now because there's no ability to do it. I'd still be very cautious about changing this project and adding any more cost to it.
It's not the whole community, Kathy. It's just one user group that
I agree.
has come
And
to 2 open forums now and made a pretty big statement. So I hear your concern. I do think, Andrew, Andrew from Arrow Street, I think we should clearly show the amount of seating space, though, on any sort of diagrams we have, because
Yes.
that may help to alleviate concerns or questions about this.
Jason, the ugly wall is where? Finn?
No, between the 2 gyms at Neary right now.
Oh, the current Neary, okay.
Yeah, right where that red circle is. No, Finn and Woodward are beautiful gyms. They just have 2 very different uses outside of school hours at this point.
The,
And Trotter is beautiful as well.
Jason, if we were to look at, just to sort of run out the exercise, say, sort of two small cross courts, one, the elementary middle school, which is 74 by 42, decent runoff, a couple of rows of bleachers, and say, okay, that's how many square feet we need. And either it's gonna push what we have up a little bit, and we can tell you what that is, or it's gonna fit within what we have. And we can give you that data in a couple weeks.
If we
My-
did the one, it would be $5 million, so I do think that one's way too much.
I think he's saying within the existing 6,000, what could he fit? Is that
There's-
what you're
there-
saying, Larry? That's how I interpret
There's that
it. Just
exercise.
flipping the
and
gyms around a little bit from a
Yep.
design perspective.
There's that exercise, and then the other is to say, well, if you really said you wanted to incrementally creep this out a little bit, here's how much space you'd need, and we can give you the number. And I hear what you're saying, Kathy, is there may not be that appetite, but at least it would give you the number to tell folks what it would be.
It's just like I view this just like the auditorium. A lot of people were pushing for that until we started seeing the numbers, right? So I just think we need to do our due diligence. In my view, is we do the due diligence and then we make up our mind of whether this dies on the vine or we keep advancing it. Go ahead, Denise, then Mark. You're
So
on
if I'm,
mute, Denise.
if I'm understanding this correctly, the footprint actually of the building is going to be enlarged. The gym that we're talking about, if we enlarge it, is not taking away from the space we already have designated for different rooms. Is that correct? This would be an additional foundation, a complete addition
Yes.
size-wise to the footprint, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, it wouldn't be at the expense of other spaces.
Okay, that's what I wanted to be sure. Okay, thank you.
Mark?
Yeah, let me just throw up one little cautionary flag. Last meeting, we were discussing the underground unsuitable soils and thinking about pushing the building back a little bit. I would just caution us, if we're going to increase the size of this, that we may be pushing ourselves into a more risky spot of the site because we're getting back closer to the unsuitable soils. So we need to know, if it gets bigger, we need to know what that impact is.
Yeah, it's a fair point.
Andrew P. Granted, we have two Andrew P's, but Andrew P. from the town.
Advisory P. But geez, I haven't heard the comments, so I'm assuming it's coming from Southborough youth basketball or some organization like that.
It's multiple youth sports organizations that
Yeah.
are craving for indoor space that are renting
Yeah,
at excessive rates from other organizations, both in Southborough and out of Southborough, was the comment.
yeah. So I think it would be, okay, let's understand. I mean, they're not town organizations, right? They're not town government, right? So people pay to go into those organizations, so they're private organizations. So understanding, okay, even at the max rental rate, what's the break even? How many hours are we going to have to rent this thing, to make it break even, with having to heat it and staff it and clean it, right? Assuming it was just basically, if we were doing this as a private ROI, would this make any sense? And I think that's where it's going to be. If it's 3 million, 2 million, 5 million, whatever the number is, I understand it would be nice for people in town to have that extra space, but St. Mark's has 2 gyms, Fay has multiple gyms, they rent them out, and if I know people would rather be in a school one maybe, but that's a lot of extra money for the town to pony up just to make it convenient on our youth sports groups. But I think we should run that analysis if we can.
Okay. All right. Anything else in the gym, Arrow Street?
No, I think we're all set on that.
All right. Let's move to design review then.
Great. Okay. So what I'll walk you guys through next is some incremental updates to the plans that we've been doing. And as you know, this has been a sort of an ongoing process that we've been doing on a 2-week cycle with Greg and some of his staff and educators in the schools. And this has been a very productive process that we're going through. And we've also got some feedback about the layout of the Learning Commons, which I'll take you through. And it seems like there's a kind of a consensus that's solidifying around a direction that we just want to make this group aware of, so that you're looped into sort of the current state of the design. So what we've got here is the first floor plan, and we have been continuing to sort of dig in and develop the specifics of the classroom size, how one enters the classrooms, how the classrooms relate to the small group rooms, whether or not classrooms have adjoining doors between them, whether there are, and in conjunction with that, we've been having the conversation about how does the Learning Commons relate to those classrooms. And I've got another slide in a couple that goes into more detail on that. We've been developing the bathroom counts and having conversations with everyone about staff and faculty toilet rooms and where they would be ideally located. And so we've been working through that. We've been working on making the plan as efficient as we can with the administration area and the medical suite. And when there's opportunities to consolidate corridors from 2 to 1, we're doing those types of things which will all help with our the continual sort of balance of net to gross that we're always negotiating. I will say that something that you'll see probably in the next time is some adjustments to the entry of the school. We're having some conversations around how the service areas of the building relate to the overall larger site plan, and that has the potential to kind of shift, not big moves, but kind of shift things a little bit about how the cafeteria and kitchen, stage, and then therefore music are all kind of relating to each other. And so I'm just giving you a heads up that that's sort of something that's getting sort of internally adjusted. And once it's kind of landed into a great spot, we'll be bringing it in front of you guys again. On the second level, we are the classroom wings is the same discussion that we talked about below. We've been getting some more clarity about, we had been, I'll zoom in here. We had been showing a pair of school psychologist offices together and a pair of behavioral specialists together. We've been getting feedback that those are really better set up as one of each together, and then another pair elsewhere. So we're making some adjustments there, and as well with the speech, we've been getting feedback that will work better as instead of one 200 square foot space as 2 100 square foot spaces. So that's the kind of granular level that we're getting to, which is great because it's really getting everyone's head into how they're really going to use the building and these rooms, and we're making these adjustments so that it really serves their needs. And before I go into the Learning Commons and some more detail about the classroom layouts, are there any sort of big picture questions about the floor plans? Okay, so I'll go here to this slide. So I think in the last NBC meeting, we had taken you through the fact that we were looking at these kind of 2 models of how the Learning Commons might be set up in the building, the continuous width approach, which is here on the top, or the centered approach. And we had sort of done a bunch of studies looking at interior perspectives and how things will relate to the classrooms. And then Greg and his team had put together a survey that they sent around, and we just sort of highlighted a couple of bullets that were from the feedback. And so that was that 77% of the respondents, of which I think there were many preferred the continuous width layout of the Learning Commons over the centered approach. And it was kind of evenly split, but almost, slightly in favor of placing the cubbies in the Learning Commons as opposed to within the classrooms. And so from that feedback and from our subsequent conversations with the working group, we are intending to continue with this direction of the continuous width Learning Commons in SD. It seems to be sort of checking all the boxes and meeting the needs that they've got for how they want to use and can imagine using the space. And I'm going to zoom in now. So this is sort of a larger version of that plan on the top that we just saw. And really, we were digging into how does one enter the classroom? How does one enter the small group room? Do you have access from the classroom to the small group room? Are the classrooms connected to each other? And I'm not going to take you through all of the minutia that we went through with the working group, but we were looking at issues of access versus security, because the more accessible and flexible things might be, there is a sort of a flip side to that, where it might be a little bit more involved to secure in a lockdown situation. And so we looked at sort of several different ways of thinking about it. And what you're seeing here is sort of the conclusion of that process, where it feels like this is offering what the educators and administrators have said would work well for them. And so to walk you through with that, how this works, I will get my pencil out again. There's essentially off of the Learning Commons, we have these areas which are sort of like a front door, if you will, to a pair of classrooms in a small group room. So from each of these sort of recesses off of the Learning Commons, you can move into either classroom or into the small group room. There was a lot of strong feedback from the survey that the small group room would be much more desirable if you could directly move from the classroom into the small group room. And so these are highlighted in this kind of light blue color. So in each case, you can actually move in from the classroom into those rooms. And then another piece of feedback that was very strongly represented was the desire to have a connecting door between pairs of classrooms, so that a teacher can, stand and have the ability to kind of see both two classrooms if the other teacher needs to step out or is busy doing something else. So this sort of represents the level of flexibility and connectivity that's been requested. Also included here is an operable wall. And the idea here is that there would be one of these per grade level. So there's a total of, what we're assuming right now in the project is that there's a total of 4 of these in the project. So if this is, one floor of one wing, this could happen in between one pair of classrooms. What that allows, these classrooms to operate is they can operate individually. They can operate as sort of a paired classroom group like this. And then there's also the ability for, one opening here where those 2 classrooms can actually open up into one larger space. And that seems to be representative of what we're hearing from the administrators and the educators so far. I know that was kind of a lot. Any questions about that?
On the operable wall, I thought one of the things that we didn't like at Neary was the fact that there was the temporary wall in between, and that the sound would carry from one room to another. Is this like some special soundproof operable wall or something?
Well, so we've heard is that there's a benefit to the being able to have the possibility of doing this and opening it. Is it soundproof? No, they are certainly, better these days than the vintage that's in Neary. It's not going to be as soundproof as a stationary wall.
As long as Greg and Keith, you're okay with it.
Yes, I think
Okay.
we're still in conversations with the Arrow Street team.
Okay.
Okay. And just as a sort of reminder of what this kind of learning commons space is, I'm just going to reshare a couple of views that I think we looked at once before with this group. But here you can see the idea that there are sort of clusters of different types of furnishing. This is sort of one of those recesses I was talking about where you can enter into 2 classrooms or the small group room. There will be a series of interior windows that allows a teacher to be who's in the classroom who may have sent students out to be able to kind of peek out and see what's going on out there, so that they're still able to kind of have that line of sight to the students. And looking in the other direction, the other thing that other feedback we received from the group was that we've been sort of identifying at the end here with some large windows to bring in light and views to the landscape. This is sort of the STEM desk area, and previously we had shown the kind of base cabinets and counter in the space, and they had requested that we move it against the wall, which would, this is a better view for that, would make it more flexible. So we're now showing that with 2 sinks against the wall, potential whiteboard tax surface for the lessons. Potentially there could be additional upper storage if needed. That's something we're still discussing. Potentially there's a recessed screen in the ceiling that can then drop down with a ceiling mounted projector for large presentations. But one of the modes of use that has been talked about is the full grade meeting, and this would allow the students to kind of stack in the space and look down and see whatever the lesson is or whatever's being presented. So it feels like all of this is gelling fairly well, and that's sort of where we're at with our update.
Questions from the committee? All right, I'm seeing none. So,
Great,
spoke
thank
too
you.
soon. Go ahead, Kathy.
Can you remind me who is on the working group? I should know, but I don't.
The only member of our committee that sits in as she's available is Denise, but then I'll let Greg speak to the educators that are involved.
Sure. So we have a couple principals sitting in, and then we have a special educator, Lisa Goulet, a Finn teacher, Allison Stevens, and a music educator, Lise Bignice. And we also have David Finneran, who's association president, and also a 4th grade teacher in Neary.
Who are
So those are the members.
Which principals?
Kathleen Valente and Steve Mucci.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And actually Clayton's been at some of them as well.
All right, any final words for Skanska or Earl Street?
No, all set.
All right. Go ahead, Roger.
So so all 3 elementary principals are at least represented in that working group? Is that what you said?
Yes, I wasn't sure if people could hear me.
Okay.
Can
Okay.
people hear me?
We
Yes.
can.
Thank you.
So also just in terms of process, Jason, I don't know if I want to just take a second. We did present some preliminary designs so that Andrew provided us with all three faculties. So we had faculty meetings, we went over the design, talked about spaces, and that resulted in ended in a survey, and that was the data that Andrew spoke about that we used to kind of used to make decisions.
Thanks for that, Greg. Kathy, is your hand still up or is that,
I've got another question.
go ahead.
Is Kate still here? I don't see her.
I don't see her anymore now. You want to ask your question and have Arrow Street come back with
I was
the
gonna say
answer
she
at a later
stepped
point?
out. She stepped out to get her son in bed, so I can ping her again if you want, Kathy.
No, I think, Larry, this one's pretty easy. So going back to the two, what we think are the choices, the geothermal or the non-geothermal. Do we believe that the design that we're going to do, if we pick geothermal, is going to qualify for the 3 MSBA extra points, incentive points?
Yes.
Okay, what about the other point?
The indoor air quality, they're reasonably independent of each other, but yes, it would.
Okay, so we believe that if we pick the geothermal system, we will get the 4 incentive points, is what we think.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, with that, I'll move on to public comment. Is there any public comment? I'm seeing no public comment. Meeting schedule. So we will meet again virtually on 12/16 for our regular meeting. And then quick preview of that agenda. One of the items that continues to come up in the forums and certainly has come up in the committee, especially in our August discussion, is when and what would need to be done to Finn if we had not gone the 4-grade route in terms of how much that would be and when it would need to be done. From that perspective, there's obviously a added element to that in terms of if the community were to use that building going forward, if the Neary project was successful, which of those items would still need to be done just to keep the building safe versus which of the items would need to be done for the actual school building. So I expect that to be part of our agenda on that particular night with a presentation by Arrow Street of at least their thoughts. I'm sure there will be a lot of questions and back and forth at future meetings. Then on the 17th, we will be live with the Select Board and Advisory like previously discussed earlier this meeting.
16th,
Oh, sorry, Kathy.
what time is the 16th?
I believe I scheduled it for 7 p.m. Confirming 7 p.m. And then you're 7 p.m. on the 17th as well, realizing we have a 5-minute delay for whatever agenda item you have first.
And for the select board, the consultant team is planning on attending as well,
Great.
unless told
We'd
different.
love to have you.
Okay, good.
We want you there, Jim.
Good.
Okay. Is there any other business anyone wants to conduct tonight? All right. I will make a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call vote. Andrew,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Denise,
Aye.
Kathy,
Aye.
Roger,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
and I am I as well. Have a good evening, everyone.
You too.